Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of the Overtime Podcast, a Cold Front Report multicast. I'm one of your two co-hosts, Clayton Garrett. You can find me on Twitter at CFRCLAYTON. And joining me as always,
I'm Jeff Uvino. You can find me on Twitter at RealJUVEINO.
So this week we decided that we were just going to kind of skip that whole Week 17 recap, considering there wasn't much to really – well, there's plenty to talk about regarding that game, but we all know what's more important and what's at stake this week. So we figured we'd just fast forward the week and have our show on Friday morning and give you guys a nice preview to indulge in the day before the game. Now, Jeff, the third playoff game in 4 years and kind of a favorable matchup for the Buffalo Bills. What are your initial thoughts as the Bills approach the Indianapolis Colts?
Yeah, going into Week 17, I had said for a couple weeks that I wanted to play the Colts. If I'm a Bills fan, wanting to play the Colts out of any possible opponent in the AFC, because I think that this is the most inviting first round matchup for the Bills. And 5 different games needed to go the way they did. It ended up being on Sunday for that to happen, and they all did. That being the Bills beat the Dolphins in the 1 o'clock window, the Browns beat the Steelers, and then in the 4 o'clock window, both Tennessee and Indianapolis won, as well as the Ravens winning in the 1 o'clock window. And so all of that happened, and here we are with the Colts as the number 7 seed, as a wild card coming out of the AFC South and now having to go to Buffalo. And this is an interesting matchup for the Bills because the Colts do a lot of things well. But this is really what I wanted going into this week. Clayton, I don't know if you felt the same way.
I'm not scared of this Colts team at all. I think that should just be pointed out right here at the onset. I'm not intimidated by this Colts team whatsoever. And I think, to be quite honest, a lot of people entertain that whole who would you rather play? And since the Miami Dolphins didn't make the playoffs, of the AFC teams that were either in the hunt or going to make the playoffs, this would be the team that I wanted to face, probably the second most that isn't the Miami Dolphins. And we all saw what happened to the Miami Dolphins last week. So really, leading up to this game, you're seeing a variety of things across social media. Yesterday, you saw, or I believe it was yesterday. I'm sorry. I live between 2 days, so I kind of get things mixed up a lot. But you saw a video released of the team dancing at practice to MC Hammer. And some Colts players kind of took offense to this for whatever reason, because, it's the first time the Bills are having fun at practice. Like, we didn't see a snowball fight a couple weeks ago that was recorded by the owner of the team. But anyways, this is a team that's loose, that's confident, that's ready to make a playoff push. And the Colts are kind of taking on that underdog mentality coming into Buffalo this week. And that can kind of be a dangerous recipe, considering, they're the 7th seed. No one really anticipates them to go into Orchard Park and really get I don't anticipate them to give the Bills a run for their money. But it is playoff football, and really anything can happen. Do you think that underdog mentality could come into play against the Bills and could spark something for the Indianapolis Colts this week?
Well, the Colts know that they're the underdog. They're 6.5-point underdogs. And they know that there's no pressure on them. Rivers has been around. He's experienced. He knows what the situation is. And I'm sure that he's told his offense about that this entire week, as has Frank Reich, the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. And they know that they can come in and play with nothing to lose. However, I don't think that is going to give them any significant enough push to where it would make them overcome the fact that the Bills are better than them across the board. This Colts team is an interesting mix of youth and veteran presences. I think that Rivers provides great leadership from the top from them, to where, that could kind of create an environment, a scenario where they could surprise some people. However, what discounted the idea that maybe their veterans are more central to this team than their young players is the collapse to Pittsburgh, in which they were up 24-3 or 24-7 or whatever, and they ended up losing that game 28-24. That second half collapse showed me that while this team has good central leadership with a good head coach and a good veteran quarterback, he's 39 years old, he's played a long time, they don't have all those pieces put together yet, and they're capable of blowing games late. And that would be discouraging to me if I'm a Colts fan. If they would have gone into Pittsburgh and put that team away in the second half, then I would be a little more worried. if you win that game, you're 12-4, and you've got a lot more confidence, meaning especially because that was their only loss in their last 5 games of the season. I mean, this Colts team comes in at 11-5, and if you take away the week 1 loss to Jacksonville, which maybe was kind of a, tune-up game, a wake-up call from them, they're 11-4. They've won 11 of their last 15, and that's a good, significant stretch. They own wins over Green Bay, Tennessee, and Chicago, those being the only 3 playoff teams that they've beat. Their losses came to Jacksonville, Cleveland, Baltimore, Tennessee, and Pittsburgh. So they have had some good opponents, and they've had limited success against them. But the bottom line in this game is the Bills are better across the board. The Colts do a lot of things well. Their defense plays well. Their offensive line plays well. That's why Jonathan Taylor had 1,100 plus rushing yards in his rookie season. However, the Bills are better across the board. They are, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, you're right in the fact that the Colts don't scare you because there's no reason to, and that's because of the Bills' personnel. And I want to ask you, I mean, if there's one way where the Colts can really beat up on the Bills and find a way to get in this game, what aspect of the game would that be?
It definitely be with the running game with Jonathan Taylor. If you can see. If you can, I'm going to go back to that underdog conversation here in a second, but just to answer your question, if it's any way that this Colts team is going to beat the Buffalo Bills, is going to stick around for a while, it's going to be the time of possession game. It's going to be limiting Buffalo's opportunities and keeping Josh Allen by the Gatorade for a majority of the game. That's really their only option, because when you look at it, this team has allowed the second most passing yards over the last 6 weeks. They've been known to be a good defense, but their strength is in their front 7 with players like DeForest Buckner and Justin Houston and Darius Leonard and Anthony Walker and players of that variety. Whereas on the back end, ever since they lost Malik Hooker, it hasn't really been the same. They do have some nice players and players like Xavier Rhodes and Justin Blackmon. And Justin Blackmon's a player I've been a fan of since he came out of college, as is Jonathan Taylor. But the recipe for success for the Indianapolis Colts going into this game, I feel, lies on the rushing attack and trying to attack the Bills' run defense and control time of possession. But to go back to that underdog mentality type discussion, I don't know. I wouldn't say I find it weird, and I understand Vegas favors the Bills as 6.5 point favorites this week, as they should. When you're talking about the AFC hierarchy, I think these two teams are in completely different tiers and at opposite ends of the spectrum. I think the Colts are a quarterback away. And when I say that, I mean, Phillip Rivers didn't win a Super Bowl in Los Angeles or San Diego for 17 years for a reason. They had some pretty damn good teams there over his career. They had a lot of good talent, or a lot of good teams, and a ton of talent go through there since 2004. And there's a reason. And Phillip Rivers is the reason they never won a Super Bowl, is because they never got over the hump, because Phillip Rivers just flat out isn't good enough. But with the underdog mentality type thing and how the Colts are embracing that, which I respect that. Every professional athlete has to have that chip on their shoulder in some way, shape, or form. But put it in perspective. This is a football team that hasn't won a playoff game in this millennium. This is a football team that has made the playoffs 2 of the last 3 years and still has yet to get over that postseason victory hump. This is a football team that, while they're 6.5 point favorites, they still have that underdog mentality. And that's why, Jeff, a couple weeks ago when we previewed the matchup with the Denver Broncos, years past, that's a game that we can consider as people who have watched this Bills team our whole lives and have known nothing but failure, really. That's a team. That's a game that you and I would look at and say, "Oh, that could be a trap game." And I remember I asked you, "Is this a trap game for the Buffalo Bills?" And your exact words were, "Well, there's no such thing as a trap game with Sean McDermott as your head coach." And that's the biggest thing, is Sean McDermott's the head coach. And this is a football team that, even though they're 6.5 point favorites, even though you have Darius Leonard talking about how it pisses him off that the Bills took Tremaine Edmonds over him 2018 for whatever reason, even though he was a second-round pick. That's really a player that's been fueled by that sort of motivation and how many teams have passed on him. Even though you have all of that kind of window dressing leading up to this game, and that's exactly what I'm going to call it. Because at the end of the day, no one's going to remember that. No one's going to remember the Colts going into this game with an underdog mentality. No one's going to remember Darius Leonard getting pissed off because the Bills were dancing the MC Hammer at practice. God forbid they do what they want at their own practice. But, that's the thing, is the Bills, even though they're 6.5-point favorites, I still believe that they have that underdog mentality. And a lot of people think, oh, well, we've seen this team carry themselves with that underdog mentality. Now it's time to see how you do it when you're the alpha in the room. It's time to see how you do it when you're at the top. And there's really no disputing it, because let's call it what it is. This is probably the hottest team in football right now, and definitely the hottest team in the AFC playoff. And this is the hottest team going into the wild card weekend. That's for sure. So the Bills, they definitely have a lot more to lose. But if you watched that video from practice yesterday, it certainly does not seem like they're feeling the pressure whatsoever.
Well, and how could they? Because, the Bills have been going out and just destroying people. And I think that if their locker room culture is to stay loose and to have fun going into the game, then there's no reason to come into practice every day with a scowl on your face and not be able to smile until you run 300 plays. Why not be loose? I don't mind it. I don't see why the Colts would have a problem with it. I don't think it's anything disrespectful towards the Colts. Maybe they want to rally around this. It's just something that they can use as motivation, but I don't think it was disrespectful as much as it was just them enjoying practice. The Colts defense is not going to be the one that slows down this Bills offense. The Bills offense has been absolutely churning for about 2 months now, and some NFL defense is going to need to slow it down. It's not going to be the Colts. They have good players. However, their secondary is banged up. We know that Rock Yassin is out this week. Kari Willis, I believe, has been ruled out, the strong safety. And if they are already, we're going to have enough trouble guarding these Bills receivers and guarding Brian Dable's creative play calling, getting the ball to the receivers on the outside. They're really going to have trouble doing it now, missing some of their key guys. And this is in Clayton just telling me now that Willis is Willis going to play, Clayton, or is he not?
Yeah. Willis just got cleared yesterday, so that's fine.
Okay, well, he's listed as out, so somebody needs to update their website. That's somebody not being us at Cold Front, but somebody does.
That somebody is ESPN. I know exactly who you're talking about.
But still, this defense isn't going to be the one to slow down the Buffalo offense. And I don't know if that defense exists. I think that maybe it could come in Pittsburgh the week after, not trying to discount this game and look ahead to a matchup that hasn't even been set yet. But if the Bills and Steelers both win, I think that maybe will be the chance for somebody to slow down Josh Allen and the Bills. But the Colts present an interesting matchup on the defensive side. Their defensive front has some good players in DeForest Buckner. Justin Houston's been around for a long time. Danico Autry manning the opposite defensive end of him, and they can put pressure on the quarterback. And a team like the Colts that doesn't have a bunch of big name offensive weapons, T.Y. Hilton really being their only namely receiver who a lot of NFL fans would know, and then having a rookie running back and a 39-year-old quarterback, they're a team that has a lot of good players that maybe you don't know about. And that's why they're 11-5. That's why they've been 11-4 after that week 1 loss to Jacksonville, which I'm discounting because Jacksonville lost 15 in a row afterwards. You need good players. You need a lot of good players like this to beat the Packers, which they did, to beat the Titans, which they did, something that the Bills couldn't do in their matchup with the Titans. This is a good defense that can really, I think, limit the Bills' running game, if anything, and try to make them one-dimensional. And Clayton, I think that's going to be their defensive strategy, is to try to limit the Bills' run game and make them throw the ball. Now, if you're a Bills fan, who cares? Josh Allen can still throw for 350 yards every week. He's just been absolutely torching people. So who cares? But I think that might be their strategy, is take away the run game, use your defensive front. The Bills, a team that haven't been able to establish a run game in every week this year, but have at some points when they've needed to. So I want to hear your thoughts on what you think the Colts are going to be doing to try to limit that Bills offense, because as you and I both know, no one has done that in a really long time.
Yeah, this is a team, speaking of the Bills, they're a team that's on fire right now. They're rolling on all cylinders in every phase of the game, especially on the offensive side of the ball. When you're talking about a team that's averaging 47 points per game over the last 3 weeks, that's unheard of for a Bills offense. If you told me that were the case, that would be the case 12 months after the Bills playoff loss in Houston, I wouldn't have believed you. But you look at the matchup between the Colts defense and the Bills offense. This is a defense that's going to have to get out of its comfort zone if they want to even try and compete with this Bills offense, because you think about it, like I said earlier, they've allowed the second most passing yards over the last 6 games of the season. So that's kind of plays into the Bills' strength. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw the Bills spread this team out and throw the ball over the lot and Josh Allen's pushing 300 by halftime. That would not shock me whatsoever, because this is a team that struggles when you spread them out. Their bread and butter, their comfort zone is dropping. This is a zone-based defense. These are players that don't really thrive in man coverage. Like you mentioned earlier, they're going to be without their second-round pick, Rock Ya-Sin, who, to be quite honest, has kind of had an up-and-down rookie season himself. And now they're opposite Xavier Rhodes. They're going to have TJ Carey, who's been a veteran journeyman throughout the NFL. And I don't know. I don't think this Colts defense has what it takes to even compete with this Bills offense. I don't think this secondary can keep up with the Bills receivers. I think Cole Beasley is going to be returning this week. I think the fact that you saw him listed as questionable going into this game and not out, he's going to be active. He's going to play in this game. And I think you're going to see a run-heavy approach in the second half, because the Bills are going to be up by a lot at halftime, I anticipate. And I don't think this Colts defense is going to keep up with them. And I think the Bills are going to spread them out a lot. And Josh Allen's going to throw it all over the lot, and he's going to pick his matchups. Xavier Rhodes versus Stephon Diggs. Xavier Rhodes and Stephon Diggs were teammates for 4 years. The first 4 years of Stephon Diggs' career, they practiced against each other every single day. So if it's who would you take in that matchup? Pragmatically, you would take Stephon Diggs, who has been on fire, and while Xavier Rhodes has had kind of a resurgent season of sorts after having kind of a wasted season in New York last year, he's still not the player that he once was, and I don't think he could keep up with Stephon Diggs. So that's a matchup that I'm looking forward to. And if they want to shadow Stephon Diggs with a safety over the top with Xavier Rhodes and then put Justin Blackman onto his side, and for some reason, if Stephon Diggs is unable to get open and he's getting double teamed this whole game, I have a lot of confidence that John Brown can get the job done on the opposite side against TJ Carey, or Cole Beasley can get the job done on the slot. I just don't think this Colts defense matches up well with this Bills offense at all. And I don't think this one's going to be close. And I think this Bills offense is really going to ravish through this Colts defense. This is not – everybody talks about this Colts defense being good, which they are. They're a good defense, but they're not great. Everybody was talking about how great they were to start the year. This is a defense that's comfortable when they're dropping everybody else and they're sending 4. And that's just flat out not going to work against Josh Allen. If you want – for the key for the Colts defense in this game, they're going to have to get out of their comfort zone. They're going to have to send extra pressure. And that's really the only way they're going to kind of put the clamps down on this Bills offense at all, in my opinion.
Yeah, listen, it's hard for us to provide analysis talking about Buffalo's offense matching up against people when they've been doing the same thing every week. The Bills scored 30 or more points in 9 games this season. They did it in 4 of their last 5 games to end the regular season, and 7 of their last 9. 7 of their last 9 games, the Bills offense has scored 30 or more points. That's incredible. And it's really tough for us to say that a team is going to come in here and stop the Bills offense when no one has been able to do it in a long time. I mean, I don't know what else to say other than Josh Allen is probably going to throw the ball all over the field to his receivers like he has. The Bills are probably going to score a lot of points. And if Indianapolis prevents them from doing so, it's going to be national news. And that's what we've gotten to. That's a point we've gotten to. And so I think the other side of the ball is really going to be the more important matchup for the Bills, is how they can limit this Colts offense. Because if you're allowing points in the high 20s or into the 30s against them, that's where you could start to run into trouble, especially having to play from behind. I'm not so sure that that's going to happen or that the Bills will be in that situation. But I think that the biggest matchup this week is going to be the Bills defense versus the Colts offense and limiting their running game, as you alluded to earlier in the show.
Absolutely. And, I spoke of how the Colts pass defense hasn't really been up to par over these last 6 games. Well, the opposite could be said about rookie running back Jonathan Taylor, who's really kind of hit his stride over that course of time. He is second in the league in yards since week 11, behind only Derrick Henry. If that goes to tell you how good this guy is. And Jonathan Taylor, not only was he one of my favorite running backs in the 2020 draft class, he was probably one of my favorite players. He is just dynamic with the football in his hands. whether the quarterback's turning around and handing it off to him 20 times a game or getting him involved in the pass game. And I think that's something that fans should definitely look out for. Phillip Rivers completes 53% of his passes to running backs and tight ends. So he's definitely going to have Taylor involved. He's definitely going to have other running back, Nyheim Hines, involved. But Jonathan Taylor is obviously going to be the bell cow for the Indianapolis Colts this week. And I think, if they find offensive success against the Bills defense, which they will in pockets of this game, I think the Colts are going to score on their first drive. They're one of the better teams in the league in scoring on scripted drives. So I anticipate them to get that opening drive score, if you will, maybe even a drive in the second half that's scripted that they could score on. But I just don't anticipate this Colts offense being able to keep up with the Bills offense. Just flat out. If you look at the Bills over the course of the second half of the season, they've had good performances in stopping the run. They really have. But in these run-oriented offenses, when you see the Bills play those sort of teams, have they truly put the clamps on that run game where they stuffed it at the line of scrimmage every single time? Not necessarily, yes and no. But the best run defense for this Bills team has been their offense. They have played teams out of running the football. And that is really where I think you're going to get this Colts offense out of their comfort zone. Because guess what? If Phillip Rivers has to throw this football 35 plus times in this game, it's almost guaranteed this ball is going to the Bills defense at least twice. This guy, oh my goodness. I don't know. He should have hung it up. I don't think Phillip Rivers has what it takes. He's been a choke artist his whole career. He has been nothing but fool's gold his whole career. He has been nothing but a guy who yaps and talks, and he's a spaz, and he's flipping out in the pocket. And guess what? The longer he has to stand back there and try and diagnose what's going on out there, he's going to whip his noodle arm and put his whole 80-year-old back into an out route and throw it right to Trey White, and it's going to go the other way. If it's any quarterback in the playoffs this year that's going to beat the Bills, it is not going to be Phillip Rivers. It's not. Phillip Rivers' career is going to end tomorrow around 4 p.m. in Orchard Park. It is. I think he's overrated. I've never liked Phillip Rivers. It irritates me watching him play football. When these guys get older and they start to erode and their age starts to play a factor and they're not really the players they used to be, someone point me out to a time where Phillip Rivers was good. Like I said earlier, that he was in San Diego and / Los Angeles. I mean, that's going to be the most annoying thing every time I reference that. But he was in San Diego. He was with the Chargers for a long time. And to say that they never had the talent to possibly get to the Super Bowl is just ignorant, because they definitely did a handful of times over his career. And the reason they never won a Super Bowl was because of Phillip Rivers. And the reason this Colts team is not going to compete with the Bills, and I'll just say it right now, they are not going to compete with the Bills, is because of Phillip Rivers. And I anticipate he's going to turn the ball over. The Bills offense that is already maximizes their own possessions, the possessions you're going to give them during the course of a game anyways. You're going to have extra possessions. And to be quite frank with you guys, I think you're going to see a pretty lopsided score and a pretty convincing win for this Bills team.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate for a bit here. So Phillip Rivers did throw for 4,169 yards this year. He threw 24 touchdowns, which isn't great, but he only threw 11 interceptions. That's one more than Josh Allen threw. And he had a running back who rushed for 1,100 yards as a rookie as well. But the reason that the Colts are 11-5 isn't because of Phillip Rivers, first and foremost. The reason the Bills had the season they did is because they have an MVP caliber quarterback. The reason that the Colts had the season they did and that they're in the playoffs here isn't because of their quarterback. It's because of their run game. It's because of their offensive line. It's because of their defense. When they beat Green Bay in overtime, Rivers threw 288 yards. That's not great. When they beat Tennessee, he threw for 308. He is a facilitator, especially at this age. He's 39. He's a facilitator more than anything, and he has good players around him. And that's what I was saying earlier, is that this Colts team has a lot of solid players that you might not know about because they're not superstars like the Bills have. They're not superstars like the Chiefs have. There's T.Y. Hilton, and then there's everybody else. And they have solid players on both sides of the ball. That's why they're 11-5. I mean, did the Colts go and get a 24-7 lead on Pittsburgh solely because of Phillip Rivers? No. Did they blow the game because of Phillip Rivers solely? No, maybe you could attribute that to him, Clayton, since you're obviously not a Phillip Rivers fan. But I don't think that Phillip Rivers is the number one reason why the Colts are here. It's because of their coaching staff and the job that Frank Reich has done there. It's because of their roster, the first man to the 53rd man, and because they do good things. They run the ball well, and Rivers is still good enough to make that offense work. An offense that maybe Jacoby Brissett wasn't good enough to make work. I think that we saw Rivers' value this year. Not that Phillip Rivers set the world on fire. He was 19th in the NFL in QBR this season, but we saw his value that he could take a good roster and make it an 11-5 team, a playoff team, a team that had to squeak into the playoffs, but it was a very good year in the AFC. I don't think that Phillip Rivers is going to beat the Bills either. Don't get me wrong. I don't think the Colts stand a chance of beating the Bills. Don't get me wrong. But they're here because their roster is good, more so than their quarterback. The Bills are a quarterback first team. The Colts are a run first team, an offensive line first team, and their quarterback has done enough this season to make that into a successful NFL roster.
Yeah, you definitely make a really good point there. And, you always do a good job keeping me even keeled. You always do. I get a little too confident. I don't think I've ever gotten last year I had some pretty bad rants. So I have gotten both ways pretty bad. So Jeff's he does a pretty good job trying to keep me in the middle. So he just had to pull the reins back there a little bit. But talking about this offense, what I anticipate to see from the Colts offense is you're going to see a lot of short game. You're going to see a lot of running the football. You're going to see a lot of play action. And you're also going to see a backup left tackle in there, Jared Valdir, who is a journeyman veteran. They're going to be without Anthony Costanzo, and Chaz Green's dealing with an injury as well. And he's not going to be active for this game. He's going to be available as a backup, but they're not going to play a guy who's might not be playing at his best because of an injury in favor to some veteran like Jared Valdir. But I think the matchup on the Bills defense that I'm looking forward to the most has to be what Jerry Hughes is going to do against Braden Smith. And Braden Smith is, for those of you that don't know, Braden Smith is the right tackle for this football team. And Braden Smith, he's a pretty good player. He's a pretty good player. He's a pretty good run blocker. But I think Jerry Hughes has the extra juice, has the extra step on Braden Smith. And I really anticipate this to be the Jerry Hughes game, because here's the thing about Phillip Rivers, is Phillip Rivers is going to stand back there. He is not going to move out of that pocket. He tried scrambling once in week 1, and ever since then, he's had a minor turf toe issue that's kind of plagued him all season long. Jerry Hughes, he's coming after a statue back there. He knows it. He knows what Phillip Rivers is as an athlete. He's going to come flying like a bat out of hell off of Braden Smith's edge. And I don't think Braden Smith, I'm not going to say he doesn't stand a chance. There's going to be reps won by both sides in this game, obviously. You're not going to see a game where one player just completely dominates. But I anticipate a big game from Jerry Hughes. I anticipate a big game from the Bills front four. And I see the pressure getting to Phillip Rivers, because ultimately the thing is with Phillip Rivers is if you pressure him, if you frustrate him, he's going to try and force the ball. Where you see these quarterbacks that, like I mentioned earlier, kind of their play has started to erode as they gotten older. You've seen that with Phillip Rivers to a degree, but he's still willing to take chances down the field, which is a gift and a curse, because sometimes it'll hit, other times it's going the other way. So I'm really excited to see what will happen. I think the Bills pass rush is definitely going to get home this week. And for those of you that don't know, I guess Jeff has a Jerry Hughes jersey sitting around. How close was that to you? Did you get up and run to your closet?
I got up and took about 4 steps. It was on the couch. It's ready to go. But I'm glad you said that, because I think that the Bills getting pressure on the quarterback is going to be a big part of the defensive game plan for them tomorrow, as it is every week. It's the NFL. You got to get pressure on the quarterback. You can't give guys time to throw, or else anyone who has made it on an NFL roster is going to beat you if you don't do that. And Jerry Hughes is a central part of that. He is every single week. He has been since I bought this jersey years ago, making a calculated risk of who might be on the Bills for long enough to where I don't have to buy another jersey for a while. And he's the definition of consistency. He's there every week. And I think that the Bills are going to mix it up, getting their linebackers involved in pressuring the quarterback. And also this, I think that Leslie Frazier has been more of a risk taker in his blitz packages. I think he's been able to open up more as the season has went on. And I want to attribute that to the fact that the Bills' offense has played so well. If you know you're going to score 30 points a game, you can take more risks on the other side of the ball. You don't have to play it safe and hope that, and make a concentrated effort to give up 18, 19 points a game when you know you're going to score 30. You can take risks. You can try to get to the quarterback. You can have odd man blitzes. You can rely on your corners, leave them in single coverage more if you know that you're scoring on the other side of the ball. And I like that you think Jerry Hughes is going to be a factor this week. He's one of my favorite Bills, and that's why I had this jersey sitting here. And I have another thing sitting here for you, Clayton, as we get into our game pick whenever that comes, that I'll debut for you there as well. So be ready for that.
You have a surprise for me? Are you going to pick the Colts or something? Are you what?
I don't know.
Oh, he doesn't know. He's got the people on the edge of their seat. He doesn't know.
I did. Hey, I will say the last time you and I disagreed on our pick, I picked the Cardinals.
Oh, get out of here, dude.
No,
that don't. Okay, that's okay. It's all right. I understand. But back to this Bills defense. Jeff, one player that we were critical of at the start of this year, and one player that you and I have both really warmed up to because he has played really, really good football over this stretch of games that this Bills team has been rolling. If this Bills defense wasn't so talented, if you didn't have players like the two safeties they have, like one of the three best corners in football in Tre'Davious White, he'd probably be the best player on this Bills defense. And the one player I'm going to be watching in this game, probably more than anybody, is linebacker Tremaine Edmonds. Tremaine Edmonds, after a shaky start to the year, you've seen him really come into form over the last half of the season. And he hasn't really had a drop-off. There's been a few plays, every linebacker, there's going to be a few plays. You're involved in the play pretty much every snap. So there's going to be a few plays for every linebacker in this league. But Tremaine Edmonds has been playing out of his mind over the last 2.5 months. And we talked about the Colts run game. We talked about how this offensive line and the line of scrimmage, Tremaine Edmonds flying sideline to sideline, stuffing the gaps, having his assignments, making the correct reads, not being confused, which Frank Reich, he is a really good offensive coach. He knows how to draw up schematics that do confuse players. I do think Tremaine Edmonds is, he's capable. He is more than capable. We have seen that over the last 2.5 months, because that's why I keep bringing it up, because we talked about it at the beginning of this year, and it got to the point where with his hurt shoulder, you and I were talking about whether or not he should move to outside linebacker, whether or not he'd be better suited to play outside where he doesn't really have much. Well, he does still have gap responsibility, but that's not the point. Where he would be relied upon less to kind of have that responsibility and be less disciplined, and he can kind of see ball, go get ball. And, he could go out there and just run around and make plays, and he has less responsibility of the overall defense. But now we have seen Tremaine Edmonds come into form. We've seen him, be the player that we expected him to be in this season. He had a solid year last year, and we anticipated a step forward. And obviously that injury played a part in the start of the season. But you've seen Tremaine Edmonds play out of his mind over the second half of the year, and I don't think this game's going to be any different. I think the reason this Bills defense is going to be successful against this Colts offense, and when we come out of this game, we're going to be mentioning Tremaine Edmonds once again.
Yeah, when you and I talked ill of Edmonds, it was in the beginning of the year when he was dealing with that injury, and we thought that it was a lack of progression in the offseason more so than it was the injury, and we were wrong. I was wrong, especially in my analysis that Edmonds hadn't progressed from last year to this, because it was just the injury that he was dealing with, and he's been really good since then. And I think that him being healthy, as well as the return of Matt Milano and the development of AJ Klein and the Bills being able to find a role that he can play in this defense that makes him be successful, it's evolved into a really good linebacking core for this team that's been able to help out getting pressure on the quarterback. I know I talk about that every week. I talk about it multiple times every week, but it's so imperative to be able to do that. If you're giving Phillip Rivers 4 seconds to throw the ball, he's going to torch you. Anyone is. But if you're not giving him that, if you're rushing him, then he's not going to beat you. I know that you're not scared of Rivers no matter what he does, Clayton. But if they're putting pressure on the quarterback, he's going to have a long day back there. And if they're not, then he might find some success. And Edmonds, Milano, and Klein have all been valuable in doing that, as have the Bills' safeties. And their linebacking core, I think, has really been the centerpiece of being able to turn around the Bills' defense, the performance that they've given us in the second half compared to the first half, where they did struggle. And they left us asking a lot of questions in that first half of why the Bills' defense that was so dominant last year couldn't replicate that in the 2020 season.
And man, I love it when the people are commenting on the show. I love it when you guys are always active for this show, and I appreciate that, especially it being a morning show and given the turbulences of this year and how it's changed with this show. But Vincent Mayas has Milano also, and I'm really sorry if I said your name wrong. I try my best. Some of you guys have it's there's some that are fairly straightforward, but goodness. So I agree with you. Matt Milano is also going to be an integral part in this football game. And while I mentioned Edmonds solely, it's because he's the middle linebacker. But let's not forget, Milano's probably going to get 100% of the snaps for the first time since the first month of the season. This is going to be, I wouldn't say we're going to peg it as the Matt Milano game, but this is the game that Matt Milano is coming in there. And you know what? These guys are business guys. They understand what it is. Obviously, they understand the task at hand, and they know they're trying to go get a Super Bowl. I don't think that Matt Milano is going to have his future contract for whether it's the Bills or some other team solely on his mind this weekend. Absolutely not. I don't think he's not a selfish player by any means, and that's not me calling a player selfish if he has his contract in mind, which every player should. But with that being said, Matt Milano, he has an expiring contract this year. And given the fact that he didn't really play a lot this past regular season up until about the midway point, it was the Miami Dolphins game. That was the first one with that ruptured pectoral muscle. So Matt Milano coming back and finally being able to get the share load of the snaps, finally not being on a limited basis where he can just go out there and he can fly around. And he's not worried about his health. And it feels like Matt Milano has been worried about his health since as long as Tremaine Edmonds has. We haven't seen Edmonds take that break that we saw Milano had to, considering the severity of the injury. But we did see, we're going to see Matt Milano return to form in this Bills defense. And that's not to say that he hasn't flown around and made plays on a limited basis in this Bills defense, but to see him come back to 100% of the snaps, this kind of goes into what we talked about throughout the season, is the fact that this Bills team, they're playing their best football at the right time, and they're getting healthy at the right time. And it's not like they're just they're role players that are getting healthy. Matt Milano is a difference maker in this Bills defense. Earlier this year, we were talking about how he was the best linebacker on this team, and Tremaine Edmonds wasn't living up to expectations, as we had just alluded to. But Matt Milano, he is dynamite in this Bills defense. I understand I have my opinions on who you should and shouldn't re-sign this upcoming offseason, but there's no denying that Matt Milano, he is a huge difference maker in this Bills defense. He is going to make a big impact this week, and I think this Bills linebacking core, that's who the onus falls on. That's who it falls on. I will say, in the playoffs, more so than ever, the games are won and lost at the line of scrimmage. If the Bills are getting manhandled on the defensive line and their front seven is incapable of manning up against that Colts offensive line, it could be a long day. Just as the Bills offensive line controlling the line of scrimmage against the Colts pass rush and them being unable to get in Josh Allen's face, then it's going to be a long day for the Colts as well. But I anticipate Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds to be the key factors for this Bills defense in stopping the run and stopping Jonathan Taylor and ultimately stopping this offense. Because once you get this offense passing, I really feel that you're going to get them where you want them. You're going to have one of the best secondaries in football facing up against Old Man Rivers. And that is a matchup that I will take 365 days a year and 7 days a week. So I'm really excited to see what this Bills defense can do. I think you're going to see some explosive plays from this Bills defense. I think you're going to see some explosive plays from this Bills offense. Jeff, let's get into it. Score predictions, who's winning, what's the score, and why.
Yeah, so you're right in your thought that slowing down the run game is going to be the key of this game. I think that if the Colts have a chance to win, if the Bills take away their run game, that chance goes away. And there's two ways the Bills can do that. Number one is by, using your linebacking core, using your defensive line. Ed Oliver could play a key role in this and just straight up stopping their run game, make them one-dimensional. Allow that less than 5 yards per carry, less than 4 yards per carry that you and I have talked about earlier in the season. Take away that. The second way of doing that is by getting ahead, scoring points, building a lead. You get up 21-0, even 14-0. The Colts are going to have to start to score the ball. And that's the problem with these run-first offenses, is that once you get behind, you struggle to come back because you don't have that quick strike ability. The Bills do have that. The Bills are a run and gun offense. Josh Allen is a certified gunslinger in the NFL, and they're going to get their points this week. They're going to get their points against everybody, I think. Who is going to slow this Bills offense down? I don't know. I see a lot of people out there that are picking the Bills to win the Super Bowl. A lot of people, not just Buffalo-based. A lot of people out there who cover NFL nationally, who cover other NFL teams, are picking the Bills to go to the Super Bowl. This game is just the first step. The Bills are going to get their points. The Colts are going to get some points as well. I think the Colts show up hungry in this game, but you're not going to slow down Josh Allen. The Bills win 34-21 in a game that has me nervous, but maybe that's just because I care. This is going to be the first stepping stone into what could potentially be a Super Bowl run. And while I'm not so sure, I'm not sold that the Bills are going to go all the way to the Super Bowl. I'm not sold like so many of you are that no one is going to beat the Bills. But if they do, I got a nice bottle of champagne waiting for when they do.
A bottle of champagne. You definitely made a conscious effort to have that at your bedside for the show. I know you did, just for that.
Hey, man, it's going to be polished off. It's going to taste so sweet if the Bills go to Tampa Bay and win that Super Bowl. But that is a long ways away. We got this game to go through first. So let's hear what you have to say.
Honestly, like I keep saying, this game, it really does come down to stopping the Colts rushing attack. And once you see the Colts rushing attack stop, I think you'll see the Colts offense kind of come to a halting stop as well. And when it gets bad, it gets really bad for this Colts offense. When it gets ugly, it gets really, really ugly. Like it goes from like a 4 to like a -2 on a 1 to 10 scale. But, in all seriousness, you kind of touched on the nerves of this game. And I really want to touch on that because 2017, when the Bills made the playoffs, it was a statistical anomaly. And, it was kind of like, the first time, if you grew up without friends and then you found friends and then you got invited to the party, it was like, you're just happy to be here. You don't really care who talks to you. If you're standing in the corner by yourself, you're cool. You're just happy to be here. Then in 2018, they missed the playoffs. 2019, that was the team that was the year that the team had really come to fruition. And also the only reason I kind of stopped in my speaking is as we're talking, Stephon Diggs has been named as a first team All-Pro. That is the first time in Bills history that they have ever had a first team All-Pro wide receiver. But back to my prediction, you talk about a team that runs the football, and you talk about a team that last year Josh Allen knows what it is. Josh Allen knows that game. And I'm really glad somebody asked him a question regarding that game last year because it still sticks with him. And that's what a competitor that's what a competitor is. And that's why I said at the onset of this show that, while the Colts are embracing that underdog mentality, while they're embracing that identity going into this game, as they should as the 7th seed, they really have their backs against the wall, and there's nothing to lose for that football team because, quite frankly, any other year in NFL history, they're not even in the playoff. So they're playing with house money right now. And, going back, you talk about how Josh Allen played in that playoff game last year. It wasn't as bad as some of these national pundits want to say, where he was like, he was awful. He was atrocious. It wasn't that bad. People kind of blow that out of proportion. But Josh Allen, he's coming into this game with his underdog mentality, with that kid who sent 1,000 emails out, with that kid who was a junior college guy, who went to Wyoming. That's who Josh Allen is. And that's why, it kind of dumbfounded me. not only because I'm so used to the Bills being underdogs, but because people think just because they're finally, proving it, just because they're finally winning, that they're going to lose that underdog mentality. Because guess what, guys? Once you get that chip on your shoulder, if you're a true competitor, if you are a true leader, if you are a true winner, you don't ever lose that chip on your shoulder. That chip's on your shoulder forever. Tom Brady has been the underdog for 20 years. For 20 years, Tom Brady has been the underdog. I don't want to hear anybody say any different. I understand he can win as many rings as he wants. But Tom Brady, in his mind, he has always had that chip on his shoulder. He has always had that surrounding doubt around him. That's been what's fueled him. So that's why it's kind of dumbfounding to me to see these Colts players like, okay, all right, we're watching you. Like Darius Leonard's liking tweets. He's like, oh yeah, they passed on me in 2018. Well, they passed on you not only for a franchise quarterback, they passed on you for a more athletically gifted linebacker, which you guys have had. He's had a better career by far than Tremaine Edmonds at this point. But that's neither here nor there. The Bills are coming into this game with as much motivation as any favorite this weekend. They are. And anybody that tells me different, they're ignorant to this football team. They're just looking at the betting lines. They have not studied this football team. They have not watched this football team. And they just started watching when they got good. So with that being said, I said earlier that this game's not going to be close. And I really want if Phillip Rivers wasn't a garbage time quarterback, which he is a garbage time quarterback, I would predict a touchdown less. But I'm taking the Bills to win this game 37-24. I was thinking all week the Bills are going to win this one 37-17. But since Phillip Rivers is a garbage time quarterback, I'll give him one more touchdown. The Bills are going to win this one by more than 10 points again. What would that be? That'd be their 7th consecutive win by more than 10 points, and they're going to the divisional round, and I anticipate they'll play the Pittsburgh Steelers in Buffalo next week. So,
that's best case scenario. You want to play the Steelers next round. You don't want the Browns. If you're a Bills fan, you're rooting for the Steelers this week. You don't want the Browns to win and then play the Chiefs, and then you have to play either Tennessee or Baltimore, two teams that, in my mind, are a lot more scary than Pittsburgh is right now.
I'll take Tennessee considering they couldn't rush anybody. They can't rush a passer. They can't defend the pass. They're kind of a defense that's in flux. I think that their game against the Bills earlier this year was an anomaly. You're talking that's neither here nor there. I'll talk about the Titans if we have to play those scumbags again. And I call them scumbags. I don't like the Titans at all. I don't like Mike Vrabel. I really don't like that football team. And I think, I kind of hope that the Ravens crush them this week. I really do. I really do. And I anticipate the Bills will play the Steelers next round. But anything can happen. And it's going to be really exciting. This is exciting times in Buffalo. This is really exciting. The energy around here, it's kind of incomparable. I understand, surrounding with the pandemic and, masks and everything else. But even though we can't have firsthand experiences with people that we used to be able to have, where we could just talk to people in the store. Now everybody's all sheltered and covering their faces and everything. The energy around here, it's different. I could feel it in the air. The Bills are good again. I can feel it. And, I remember when I was a kid and I was in elementary, I don't know why I remember this, but when I was in elementary school, a teacher told me, I'm not a Bills fan, but I'm happy when they're winning. And the reason being is because when the Bills are winning, this area is probably one of the more fun areas to live in the entire country. Living in the Rochester, Buffalo area, when the Bills are good, it's just there's that aura in the air, and that aura has returned. And, I don't think that aura is going to be leaving anytime soon. To be quite honest with you, I think it's going to come down, when it comes down to it, the road to the Super Bowl is going to go through Buffalo. I think that's going to be the case in point that we're going to be talking about in weeks in the future. But I'm really looking forward to this game, Jeff. 1:00 tomorrow. It's almost 24 hours away. It's going to be a fun game. And, hey, the playoffs have returned to Buffalo.
They have finally. Breaking news recently: Stephon Diggs been named first team All-Pro. Josh Allen and Cole Beasley all named second team All-Pro, as has Trey White and Andre Roberts. So just a reiteration: Stephon Diggs first team All-Pro, Allen, Beasley, White, Roberts all second team. The Bills PR putting that out a couple minutes ago on social media.
How many players is that? 6?
5.
Oh, my bad.
5,
Mike
yeah,
Bailey,
and with Diggs being the only first team, but for second team, I mean, hey, isn't that something on our Buffalo Bills?
that's awesome. And
And one other note, this weekend, I want people to appreciate this playoffs. There's 5 quarterbacks who are old guys who have been around for a long time who are in the playoffs. Brady, Breeze, Rivers, Roethlisberger, and Aaron Rodgers. Those guys have been around for a long time. They've been around for my entire life that I've been watching football, and this could be the last go around that we see all those guys. So appreciate them. Appreciate your legends, football fans, especially in the playoffs.
Philip Rivers isn't a legend. I'll fight you. I will physically.
All right, then appreciate Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, and Ben Roethlisberger. Appreciate them.
I'll appreciate them. I'll appreciate them. Yeah, I'll appreciate them. But Mike Reale asks in the comments, who upset KC thing? I think it's going to be the Ravens. I think the Ravens are going to crush the Titans this week. And I think they're going to go and crush Kansas City next week because Kansas City hasn't played good football in just as long as the Bills have played really good football. So, but we're not covering the Kansas City Chiefs today. We're not covering the Baltimore Ravens today. Jeff, we've covered all our bases with the Buffalo Bills facing off against the Indianapolis Colts. It's been a fun show. I want to say thank you to everybody in the comments. Thank you to everybody that's listened. Jeff, please tell the people where they can find you and what they have to look forward to if they do.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at RealJUVEINO. You can find me on Instagram at my name at Jeffy Vino. I'm on Facebook and everything else where you might be able to find somebody on social media. I'm hoping, Clayton, that this isn't our last show where the Bills play a game and we have a game to preview. Hopefully we can preview another game next week. I think that's our goal. That's what we're hoping for. And we'll see how it goes at 1 o'clock on Saturday.
Well, either way, you're going to want to tune into the episode because I think if the Bills lose to the Colts, I'm going to have a lot of things to say. I know I will. I don't know how pissed off. Jeff is pretty even keeled, like I said earlier. He's not going to get too upset or he's not going to get too excited. I think he could get too excited if the Bills end up winning this one by a landslide. But if you be sure to follow the Cold Front Report on Twitter at Cold Front Report. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Cold Front Report _ Bills News. Be sure to drop a like on our Facebook page, Buffalo Bills Cold Front Report. Subscribe on YouTube, Cold Front Report. Put on the bell icon so you know whenever we go live. You can also do that on Facebook. And if you'd like to find me on Twitter at CFRCLAYTON, and this is the first week that I did a little extra preparation for this show, Jeff. If you guys want to find us, not only can you find us by going on Twitter and searching, the @ under our names on your screen, you can also find the links to our Twitter accounts in the description of this video on Facebook and YouTube, not Twitter because Twitter has character limits and I don't put a description for that. But this was a fun show, Jeff, and I think this is going to be a fun game for not only the people at the stadium, but also the people at home watching. And, I think this is going to be a fun game for the Buffalo Bills, most importantly. And I'm really looking forward to it. The Bills match up well with this team. And, hey, thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for commenting. You guys are the best fans in the NFL. I don't care what anybody else has to say. I don't care how many tables you guys break. I don't care how many crazy things Bills Mafia does. You guys are the best fans in the world. You guys indulge in all this content. There are a ton of content creators. And the fact that you guys choose to watch us on your mornings during the weekday, it's humbling. And I appreciate every single one of you. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening. Stay safe, stay healthy. And this has been the Overtime Podcast presented by the Cold Front Report.